Well, thank you all for joining us. And as I said, this webinar is going to be absolutely epic. One of the things that I think a lot of people are getting wrong, and I don't mind saying this, is that we spend so much time designing our conversational AI assistants. We spend so much time worrying about the conversation design and worrying about dialogue management, worrying about crafting NLU. We go live and it's like a website. You just go live and forget about it. Whereas the reality is, I always say that when you go live with something, that's the beginning of your journey. It starts when you go live. And the reason why we've called this webinar Into the Black Hole is because when people go live with a chatbot normally, they just do all of the data that gets kind of like produced, crucial business data, not just in terms of managing the performance of the actual assistant, but managing the performance of your business. You're really understanding and learning what your real customers need. And normally all of that data goes straight into a black hole and it's never seen again. But we're about to change that, and we are going to change that in this webinar with Wysdom AI. We're joined by the CEO, Ian Collins, and we're joined by Senior Director, Jay Athia. And we're going to be going through 4 key metrics that you need to use in order to, first of all, understand your conversational AI assistant performance and, crucially, improve it over time. So without further ado, boys and girls, as I said, do stick your questions in the Q&A as we go through the session, and we'll do our very best to put them to you. But without further ado, boys and girls, please welcome Wysdom AI. Ian, Jay, welcome. It's fantastic to have you along. Thank you so much. We're getting so many people joining. We've got people from Liverpool as well in the UK. Barney says, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Absolutely true. Fantastic. So let's maybe kick off with a little bit about Wysdom, shall we? So Ian, do you want to kick us off and maybe introduce yourself and tell us a bit about Wysdom AI and what you do, and why did you decide to focus on analytics, first of all?
Great to be here. Thanks, Kane. So yeah, a little backgrounder. I was saying that nobody could hear that I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. Started my first company back in '93. And one company in particular I just wanted to mention was the emergence of smartphones. It's 2002, 3, 4. Smartphones just hit the marketplace. Most people probably don't remember, but if you had a smartphone, you called 3 times more often into your telco, and the calls were 3 times as long. So my co-founder and I had built a product back in those days. We called Mobile Diagnostics, or that was the company name. Looked over the air as an analytic solution that solved your smartphone problem and pushed a solution back. And it was sort of the catalyst for what we're building here today. The basic premise is that enterprises, large organizations sometimes struggle with new technology and some of the unintended consequences. And I think we're seeing the same thing in the bot world. We started this business many years ago with the assumption that conversational AI was going to hit hit the enterprise market, and they may struggle to really get full benefits. So we thought the background solution, the analytics and reporting, and some of the less sexy stuff might be the place to build. While many people are building the front end, the application, the chatbots, super interesting. We thought we'd focus on the back end, a little less sexy, but sometimes some great businesses there. So we're going to tell you a lot more about it. Well, that's what we do: chatbot analytics and reporting, and we're focused on making chatbots great.
Nice. Yeah, go on. I'll just say before we bring Jay on, my dad always says, he's a golfer, and he always says, drive in for sure, put in for dough, which means that you can hit the ball a mile, but it's the boring stuff that no one really wants to practice that really matters. And I think that's kind of where we are with conversational AI. It's the boring stuff that people think is not important, I can't be bothered with that, and they skip over it, but that's actually the catalyst for actual success, Jay.
Yeah, it really is. And I've been here about 5 years. We've launched many bots, and everyone's excited that day one. There's always sort of a launch party. And then when it gets into, okay, week 1, week 2, month 1, month 2, now what? How's it doing? And the questions evolve over time, which is the interesting part. You can sort of say, what data do we have? How do we track it? And what's important a month in or 2 months in, you forget about. And then a year later, you're looking at, some other metrics or some other information to help take you to the next level. So it keeps changing, it keeps evolving. And especially in the last 8 months, as everyone knows, with the leaps forward and internet AI, you start thinking about what else we can start looking at and measuring and making sure we're informing our business moving forward. But a really exciting time to be in this space.
It really is. It's as you say, especially in the last kind of 8 months or so. Drop us a comment in the chat there. Well, not the chat, but the Q&A. Let us know, broadly speaking, your kind of experience level with conversational AI. Just drop a quick comment in there. Are you kind of like you know, a relative novice, more of a hobbyist? You're doing this kind of, you want to learn a bit more about it. Are you, you know, fairly experienced? Have you been doing this for a year or so? Or would you consider yourself kind of more of an expert? You've been doing this for 4 or 5 years and you've got quite a lot of experience. Drop us a little comment in the chat there. So, as I mentioned at the beginning there, if people can remember then, before we had the issue, as I mentioned in the beginning, this kind of stuff is things that, as I said, when you go live, that's the beginning of the journey. And that's when you really start to be able to digest the data. You can really understand whether what you've done makes sense, whether it's aligned to what you intended for it to be in the first place. But there's certain sort of, in the absence of that, which I think there is an absence of proper measurement and proper metrics, there's all kinds of reasons and things that are going on with practitioners whereby they have maybe wrong assumptions in certain areas. They're making certain decisions that they could avoid making if they were using analytics properly. And so we've got a selection of probably 7 or so, I would say, myths or assumptions that we need to challenge in terms of people's current usage of conversational AI. We've got some people say Patrick's beginner level, Jason is lead conversation designer now, been doing it since 2020. We've got Joe, been working in chatbots for the last year. Jason built his first chatbot with Watson Assistant, figuring out where things are going with LLMs. Patrick, beginner level. Yeah, so we've got mixture of experience there, really. Let's start in with some of the myths then. You know, as I said, there's lots of myths around here. The first one is, I need to change my platform. And that's what a lot of customers are doing that. And we've reached the limit of Dialogflow, we need a new platform. Like, why is it that you might not actually need a new platform?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, we talk to a lot of bot teams. You know, our business is not selling bots to people, but meeting teams who already have a bot and the challenges. And we talk to them, you know, regularly. I talk to, you know, a couple of prospects every week, or, you know, sometimes a couple a day. And almost, you know, without exception, we meet a bot team. They've had a bot team. Usually, you know, we meet them 6 months in at least, sometimes 2, 3, 4 years they've had a bot up and running. And everybody pretty much says, you know, I'm not 100% satisfied. You know, sometimes it's much little worse than that, being kind of diplomatic, but people aren't generally happy with the performance. They don't always have great metrics. They don't know, you know, they can't say exactly. It's kind of anecdotal. Well, you know, somebody used my bot and they said they didn't like it. And they say, you know, I'm thinking of switching platforms. It comes up all the time. You know, we see the challenge, but really our view, having seen a lot of platforms, and we help a lot of clients, you know, larger enterprise clients run their bot platforms. What we found is the platform isn't the problem. It's just not what's driving the problem. It's really, you know, management generally, managing a bot well. And, you know, we've met a lot of clients that really have, you know, platforms that may not be in the leading edge, but well managed, they're delivering great performance. You know, customers are really satisfied. They're, you know, everything's moving up and to the right. We're going to talk about some of the key metrics down the road, but the platform is almost never the problem. We've never actually found the platform the problem. We've worked with some pretty obscure chatbot platforms that maybe don't have the billion-dollar budgets of Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and these guys, but they're still able to deliver amazing performance once they get on top of it. Great analytics, understanding what's going on, and you know, really managing it well. So you know, a mediocre platform managed well is going to deliver better results all day long than the best platform in the world badly managed. So we like to say it's about management.
Very good point. Very good point. Second one then, so chatbots have a little bit of a bad reputation. Maybe we'll put this one to you, Jay, and then we'll get your thoughts, Ian. Chatbots can have a bit of a bad reputation. It's getting better, large language models, ChatGPT, stuff like that. But there was a time where people thought that chatbots, you know, were not necessarily that great, maybe because they weren't managed properly. And so there was this kind of like tussle happening, or at least a perceived tussle, between kind of saving costs. And if you want to try and save costs, you're going to end up creating unhappy customers because you're going to do something that's not necessarily in your customer's best interest. So it seems almost like we have to save money, and whatever we do, because we're trying to save money, we're not going to spend money on whatever it is that we do. And so therefore it necessitates that trying to save money results in poor customer experience. Is that true, or is that not true, Jay?
No, absolutely not. You'll hear a little bit more about from us later on this sort of balance of automation or containment. When people think about saving money, it's how do we avoid giving chats or calls over to humans, and at the sacrifice of getting people to solve their problems. But the way I think about this is apps or websites. We build them for, organizations that have self-serve through their website. You go on and you change your plan, you pay your bill, you schedule an appointment, you do all of that through the web. Then a bot gets built and it doesn't do half of that. And you sort of direct them to one place and you say, hey, we've contained them. But all you're doing is sort of shifting that traffic along to all of your different assets, and sort of ignoring the fact that the user isn't getting what they need to get. They're just going somewhere else. And so you look at that automation and you have to balance, are they solving it? Are they trying a couple times to get to their answer? Can we actually resolve that issue in the first contact? And that's the core of experience. If I don't have to go around, if I'm getting the answer I need right away, it's not taking me that long, the effort isn't that great. You sort of solve both in one. And that's why I don't think it's a trade-off. I think you can, with the right information, make deliberate decisions on how do I automate it and how do I make sure it was a seamless, effortless experience.
I should say the savings, the savings are real and legitimate. We measure the savings pretty precisely for all across all our clients. We call it cost per automated conversation, and we'll maybe show it down the road. But the cost is typically 1/5 to 1/10 of a well-managed bot. Sometimes you're not saving much money, but if the bot's well managed, it's 1/5 to 1/10 the price of a live chat. So the savings are significant. So you can see why everybody's motivated to drive into this world, and we all are pushing for the same thing. But like I say, that basic assumption, we talk to our clients many times, and they say, I just assumed I'm going to save a bunch of money, but my customers, they may not be super happy. And you don't have to make that sacrifice. It's totally unnecessary. If it's managed well and you're measuring it, like somebody said earlier, it's so true. It's the oldest cliche in the world, but you can't, manage what you can't measure. You got to measure both the cost and the customer satisfaction. You're measuring those closely, you can actually, really work them together. You don't have to sacrifice one for the other.
Nice. Third one, you can, and this is getting towards the measurement thing, and I think a lot of people do this, which is the assumption is that you can measure the satisfaction that users have with an assistant or conversational AI assistant or a bot. You can measure the success or satisfaction using surveys. Everyone uses surveys, Ian, right?
Yeah, they do, but I think most people don't want to admit that they're not useless, but they're better than nothing, but not much better. I think everybody that's been in the industry understands, surveys, you get 3 to 5% participation, sometimes worse. And 3, 4, 5% of people are going to, sort of fill out a survey, even if it's a simple thumbs up, thumbs down, and 90% of those people are complaining. Yeah, you're kind of driven to fill up some kind of survey, generally if you're unhappy. So you get this massively skewed, picture of your customer satisfaction. You've got to try and guess what the other 95% thought. There are easy ways to get around that. I mean, not easy, but if you use AI and analyze 100% of conversations, you can see in the customer's language and the words in some basic signals, like, did the customer have to repeat themselves? We call it a paraphrase score, or did the bot repeat itself? In bot repetition and many other signals and AI you can use to really get a clear picture. And we've been measuring, many millions of conversations. You don't need to use surveys to really deliver a great CSAT score. You can measure it. We're gonna show you later. We call it as bot experience score. It uses a bunch of AI and different signals. So it's way more effective. You're measuring 100%. You're not relying on people who are just irritated and probably filled out a survey to give you a real clear view. And without that clear view, as Jay said earlier, you're not managing the 2 key things. Everybody's building a bot. There's 2 things you care about. One is how effective did I solve the customer's problem? Number 2, how did the customer feel? I got to manage these 2 things together. I can't do one in isolation of the other. I need to understand them both. And if you don't have a measure, how are you going to manage them?
Mm-hmm. If I could add, I think where we looked at bots and in the pre-days before we had sort of the experience metrics and some of the ones that we'll show you later today, we looked at the thumbs down, this survey, and week after week, month after month, you'd see 90% thumbs down. They weren't happy with this response. They weren't happy with this flow. And what ended up happening is you now spend weeks and sprints and months saying, okay, what do we do about this particular topic? Because 90% of my customers are saying thumbs down. And that's all we had. And it was fruitless. You'd spend weeks again and sprints, and you keep tweaking it, and you keep changing it, maybe change the intents and the training, and nothing happened because far too few people responded, and all of them said something bad. And that'll never change. This sort of baseline amount where people are going to be unhappy. And so we had to use more. You had to tap into a bit more of the experience metrics to actually move the needle. and make a difference.
Yeah, you could be giving away free money, and there's always going to be 3% of people who are happy.
Yeah.
I want more.
There's nothing you can do about that. Yeah.
It's hard enough to get people to even fill them in the first place, isn't it?
Yeah.
People don't necessarily want to fill in surveys.
Participation is usually under 5%. Yeah, it's so low. It's not really indicative of your whole customer base.
Yeah. What is it they used to say? There used to be an old marketing sort of adage, which is that if you have a really good experience, you'll tell 3 people. If you have an average experience, you'll tell no one. And if you have a really poor experience, you'll tell 10 people. And so typically it's going to be the people who've got a problem that are going to be filling in the surveys.
Human nature, right?
Yeah. So the next assumption then is, and this is near and dear to my heart, because I was watching Family Guy last night, and it was the episode where he says, where Peter gets the spot on the news where he's doing the segment about what grinds his gears. The thing that really annoys him, what grinds my gears. So what grinds my gears is this concept of containment, and the way that people think that containment is the measure that you should be going for. Why is that not, Jay, we'll start with you. Why is containment the wrong way to think about it?
Yeah, I'll tell you a story about this one. So one of the customers I work with came a couple years ago and said, we've got this bot for a little while. Looks like it's performing well. Our containment's at 40-45%. I understand that's sort of best in class, but everyone's ticked off. We get the surveys, a small portion, but they're bad. My leadership doesn't like it. I'm still getting a flood of calls. Like what's going on? My bot looks great, on paper with my containment so high. And then it takes 5 minutes when you start looking at it to say, well, this customer just got frustrated and left. And they probably picked up the phone and gave you a call. So they went from a low-cost channel where they would have been happy to use it in self-serve to now being frustrated and then calling your highest cost support channel. And that was the problem. So you get this metric that says, hey, 45%, nearly half of my chats are contained, but they're all going somewhere else and getting higher cost support. There's more to it. And so we faced the same problem when we first launched bots. You get to a certain point and think, did we get to the most that we could have got out of this bot? And of course not. You look at more to it. There's some more signals around whether the customer sort of trying a couple of times. Did they actually get something meaningful in the response? Did they get an answer to the question they asked, as an example? All of that gives you a better and clearer picture of whether you actually solved the problem. Containment has its place, but isn't enough. And all of those on the call that have used bots in a while know that you'll get to a point and it doesn't mean your job's done. There's a long way to go in terms of solving problems for your customers.
It's a great point, Jay, too. And I think it goes all the way back to, nobody bought a chatbot or a voice bot to contain people, right? We purchased and installed and, spent all this time and money on these bots to solve people's problems. And people are measuring the wrong thing. If you measure containment, you're just like, how often did I keep them out of my contact center? That's not the purpose of a bot, right? The purpose of these bots is to solve the customer's problem. What was their need today? And did I actually satisfy that need? And you need to measure that. And we're going to talk about, how we measure that. We call it automation, but it's actually solving the customer's problem. Where containment, it's one of those metrics you should have buried in, somewhere, but it's not the metric. And I think so many people are using it as really the core guidance for, kind of their bot performance. And it really is the wrong one, we think.
Yeah, I agree. For those of you tuning in, we're going to get to the 4 key things to measure in probably about 3 to 4 minutes. We've got a couple more assumptions. I think it's important to get through the assumptions because it sets the scene essentially, and there's a lot of things that I think people might believe or do that we're going to find, as we are finding, is perhaps not the right way of looking at it. And I think that it's really good to have the right mental model when it comes into the creation and deployment of conversational AIs. So we're going to get into the real things that you need to measure, and we're going to have a look at the Wysdom platform in just a moment. But there's a couple more things that we want to challenge, I suppose, is the question, and the next one is NLU scores are all that matter. So a lot of people will create assistants. They'll do testing. Hopefully, they're doing testing on some real data as well as the training data, and not just the training data. But the K-fold scores, the kind of like confidence scores of intent recognition, those tend to be the things that are a marker and a measure of success, and that's kind of like what a lot of teams will go to. Well, our confidence is 85%, and so that's kind of important. You don't want to not recognize what people are saying, but NLU confidence scores is not the be all and end all. Ian, why is that?
Yeah, same thing. I think it's very much like containment. It's an important number. Many years ago, I think many of us were focused on it. And we'd go to, a lot of clients that we met and they said, oh, but my NLU is 99.999% or something, crazy. So that's great. But how often are you solving the customer's problem? It's, well, I don't know, but my NLU is 99.9%. And so it must be great, but it really doesn't measure your ability to satisfy customers. So again, I think it's one of those metrics. It was there. It was, came up early. If you didn't have anything else to measure, you used it because it was, it's easy to measure, pops out of the system. How often your classifier was able to, kind of understand or interpret, customer's utterance. Well, so it was a number that was available, but I think it's very misleading. Many times we'll work with our clients to dial up and down their NLU, and sometimes a lower NLU will actually deliver better results depending on how they've, architected their system. So it's not that core metric like containment, like NLU, like, whatever other, metrics we see, coming down the pipe from the old days. I think, it's time for this next generation of metrics that are more business focused and results focused.
Mm. So we've got two more assumptions. We're going to do this quick fire because I know we want to get into the reason why everyone's joined today, which is to figure out what we should be measuring instead. So two more assumptions, quick fire. Jill, we'll start with you and then we'll do the last one and we'll finish with you, Ian. So the next assumption is that I need a bunch of data scientists to properly be able to analyze my bots. And the reason why I can't do this analysis is because I don't have the resources and the data scientists. So do you need data scientists to be able to do
the shortest possible answer, and I'll tell you a story. No. We've got a tool, and we'll talk about it. The second is I'll tell you a story of what the data scientists might do. I've talked to a customer that said, I've got a team of analysts and scientists. They've got a big queue of what they're working on. So I put my request into queue to understand my bot performance. 3 months later, I get a report, and it's a data dump of transcripts. And then now I have to sort through these, and it's 3 months late, so I don't know what happened 3 months ago when I actually needed the problem or need to solve the problem. And so my bot's been operating blind to that for 3 months. So no, we've made it painfully easy to do and get insight without a team of data scientists that may be bogging down your ability to act on your bot.
Very good point. Final one then for you, Ian. Customers hate chatbots, and that's the only reason why the chatbot usage isn't growing.
Yeah, for sure. We see it all the time. We meet a lot of clients, and I probably talked to 100 bot teams in the last year. And most of them will say my volume's pretty flat and even declining in many cases. And they assume, well, that must be because chatbots are just a painful experience. Customers don't like it. But we've seen the opposite true. If it's managed well, people are paying attention. The bot teams have the tools at their disposal and they can manage this stuff up, then customers start to come back. We've seen many of our clients double their volume over the last year. And you've got to make it more prominent. You got to make it easy to find. But if it's effective and delivering a good experience, people do come back and use it. So I think the challenge isn't just bots, generally as a category is terrible, but badly managed bots, maybe they're not the best.
Nice. All right. Now then, let's move on to the thing that we've come for, the main event, the meat on the bones. If that's the case, we've challenged some assumptions. There's a few things that are not strictly correct, and I think we've kind of established that chatbot performance, voice assistant performance, conversational AI performance is more about how it's managed, and having the right tools to be able to manage it effectively are the keys to unlocking that performance. You don't need to move platforms, you don't need to hire a bunch of data scientists. There's ways in which you can do it, but how and what. So let's dive into, maybe we'll start with you, Ian. What are the things that we should be measuring instead then? What constitutes good chatbot performance?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think this is the root of it all. We talk to a lot of bot teams and they get distracted by, things like containment and NLU. But if you get to the root of why they purchased or, what they're doing with the bot, generally, they want to deliver business results. And the business results aren't complicated at all. You want to satisfy customers. Customers are inbound. You've put a bot in front of some customer service channel. You've got escalation opportunities. But your goal is to satisfy customers at a very affordable price tag. So you want to measure those and you want to make the customers feel good. So we're going to talk about, the big three metrics. And the fourth is really the way of slicing these metrics. So the key metrics, we're going to get into them a little more, but I want to understand, this is more, okay, here we go. We're going to get into, what we call bot automation. So this is the number one metric by far. When we talk to our clients, what they really want out of their bot is to take care of customers. Customer came inbound today, they got a problem. Whatever the use case is, you could be, selling things to people, you could be, solving problems, could be a billing question or tech support, whatever that particular thing is, you want to satisfy that customer. And we call this bot automation. And you got to measure this carefully. Containment's not going to tell you about this, diversion and some different resolution rates and stuff like that. You've got to have a good metric to understand how often bots solve customers' problems. And it's going to be way lower than your containment rate. As Jay mentioned before, we see a lot of clients that say, I'm containing half my customers. But you might be trapping them, irritating them, making it difficult for them to escalate, whatever the reason is. Maybe the hold times are too long. But that's not a substitute for really solving the customer's problem. And we find this number one. That is the reason people purchase these things. And that leads to, though, the second one I was going to say.
Let's do the second one in just a minute. So
sure.
The first thing we need to measure then is bot automation. Has the assistant managed to resolve a customer query? Before we move on to in fact, let's do all three and then we'll move into how it works. Maybe we should just go through all three first and then we'll get into the details. Sorry, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, because they work so closely together. Like I say, one in isolation, again, without the other really doesn't make any sense. We've seen customers driving up their automation scores once they have some, the ability to measure, but the customer sat starts going down. Oh, there's my dog bark on the doorbell. Oh, that's not too loud in there. But in any case, so you got these two things. You really want to manage them together. I've got my automation rate. I want to manage this up, continuously. True automation, you get into the 40% range and you're, starting to get best in class, but you don't want your customer sat to, either decline or, not keep up. So managing these two is difficult and, and they're somewhat in conflict. I drive up my automation. I can drive down my customer experience if I'm not careful. So again, the customer experience score without surveys is a way that you basically analyze every single conversation, typically, hundreds of thousands or millions of conversations. You want to analyze every single one with a certain set of signals that you're going to pick out of the actual words between the customer and the bot. And then, when it hands off, we'll watch the customer and the agent conversation as well. But you're going to watch that stream of words between the two and determine that customer, did they actually feel good about that? And again, it's not that difficult. You can see, things like bot reputation and tone and sentiment, and wait times compared to averages. There are many signals we've got in this bot experience score that really gives you a clear view, of that thing. And again, these two working closely together. I need to work these two, make sure I'm not giving up experience for automation or the other way around. I'm driving up my customer experience and not driving up my automation rate. Mm-hmm. And the third is, cost per automated conversation. And I think everybody in the world will say, anywhere near a contact center, everybody knows their cost per call. It's usually, in the, if you're talking US dollars, you're talking, 12 to 15 bucks, depending. Tech support calls are a little more expensive and, some you can get down toward 10 bucks, but everybody knows their cost per call, $10.32 or something. And then you'll see cost per chat. Everybody's launched live chat over the last, 5, 6, 7 years. And they'll say, yeah, I'm spending, $7.25 for every live chat. They know it to the penny, because it's very, very important, right? If you drive that down by 10 cents, you're saving a lot of money in your overall operation. And then you say, okay, but you've launched a bot. It's taking care of some customers at some rate. How, what's your cost per automated conversation? Because I want to compare that stack. And most people aren't measuring that today, because if you don't have an effective automation metric, to divide by, I've got basically my overall cost of my bot program, my platform and my management and my team and all that kind of stuff, just like I would in the contact center. I'm going to divide that by the number of contacts I actually satisfied, and I'm going to get a cost per automated conversation. And it's really a critical metric because, again, the reason you've purchased this thing, first of all, take care of customers, do it at an effective price, and don't sacrifice customer experience. So those are the big three. We talk to bot teams all day long. And at the end of the day, that's what they're looking for. Satisfy customers with with an AI, make them feel good, and do it at a very good price. And then we'll talk about the fourth piece to this. The fourth piece is really, you need to do it at a topic level. So overall, we measure a lot of bots, and Jay's going to show you when we get to the demo. You're going to see overall, I've got a bot, at a theoretical company, and you're running these scores. I got a bot automation score of 35. Like, life's pretty good. And then I've got a bot experience score of 75. Pretty solid. Can't complain. and I'm doing a, cost per automated conversation should be $1 or less. If I'm above $1, I got work to do. If I'm under $1, I'm doing all right. I say, okay, good. But what can I do with that? I can't really effectively make any changes, right? It hasn't given me enough insight to improve this bot. And that's the goal, every bot team, right? I want to make this thing better every day. So I need to take that information and go down a level. And that level is, I might be looking at one of my lines of business. I'm say customer service for a big telecom. And I'm getting, 10 million conversations a year or something going through that system. And I've got my overall scores. I want to go down a level. And this is where we use topic modeling to take them, 10 million conversations, break them into about 100 to 150 conversation topics. These are the reasons customers contact. What was their need? And then I'm going to produce these scores, BES and BAS, bot experience and bot automation. I'm going to do it by topic. Then I'm going to get some really rich information. I'm going to understand what do I need to look at, because they're going to be all over the map. I get the average at the top level, but I could have one with an automation score down in the single digits. I could have one well into the 50s and 60s. I'm doing great on those topics. I'm not doing so well on the others. My bot experience scores will be the same. It's going to be all over the map. This is where you start to get the insights into what do I need to do to improve? Where are the outliers? Where am I underperforming at this granular topic level? So you take your key metrics, you add the topics, and we found that's the baseline for really managing a bot well. Once I've got these 4 things, there's many more metrics. Jay's going to show you. We're only going to have a few minutes for a demo, but we're going to get in and you're going to get all your false positives and your invalidity rates and your escalation, variations, and you're going to get a lot of metrics. But it really comes down to these. This is going to drive you in the right direction. This is the place to begin. Then you're going to start doing investigations and understand your bot and where to improve it. But these are the things, the 3 key metrics. Do it at the topic level. You're off to a good start. Once you've got that, you can really start to improve a bot.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant.
If I kind of put that all together, step one is sort of.
Go on.
Oh,
okay, sure. Go on.
I was going to say, you got to, we talked about, you don't understand what you can't, you got to measure first. Step 1, let's make sure we got the metrics in place. And I think the next step is you only move the things you can take action on. And until you look at things at enough detail, at something you can actually control, unlike maybe a F1 score, which you have a little bit less control over, you look at the automation by topic, the experience by topic, you say, there's a problem, I'm going to go spend some time and fix it. Because you know what you can do to actually solve that problem. Go ahead. Sorry to cut you off there.
That makes sense. No, that makes sense. So all I wanted to, we've got some questions coming through here, and we're going to get to these questions because I think that there's a lot of really relevant questions here. The first kind of, I think what we'll do is I've got one question to clarify, and then I think we'll jump into the demo. We'll have a look at it because I think that might help people sort of visualize what's going on here. And then we've got a bunch of questions that I think we'll definitely have some time for. So. My first question, very briefly, is what makes a good bot automation score? You said 35 is good. What's that? 35 out of 40, 35 out of 100? Like what is a good bot automation score? I think we'll get into how it's measured and stuff like that. And then also, what's a good kind of customer experience score? Like what do these numbers mean? What does good look like?
Yeah, great question. So, we measure a lot of bots. We manage, we've got our platform deployed across a lot of different organizations in a lot of industries, banks, telcos, insurance, government, utilities, retail, and so on. So we see a lot of data across, a lot of different clients, and we can tell you basically where you rank. Typically, we get a new client, we'll plug in, we'll start to produce the scores, and we see generally, best in class on automation, where you've actually satisfied the customer, not contained them, is running, if you get into the high 30s, you're doing well. Low 40s is really as good as it gets with our current generation bots. We're talking classifier bots. So we all know generative AI is coming down the pipe, and we expect to see a nice bump in, maybe 10 to 20 points in true automation scores. And then customer experience is another interesting one, what we call BES. And it, if you manage it well, you can get into the 70s. And and the automation, to your point, is a good one. It is percentage. So in that case, I'm talking 35, 40% of all conversations. I got 100 conversations, 35 to 40 of those conversations, I can actually solve the customer's problem, and whether they escalated or not. And then on the customer experience side, a great score is 80. 80 is like the top, we're seeing. We might see a few people bumping into the low 80s. Typically in the 70s, compared to, all these clients we see, we see data from, across a lot of organizations. Low 70s is good, 60s isn't bad. And this is just a straight up score like NPS. NPS isn't a percentage. It's just, you do this math and you get a certain number. And we see the same thing on this bot experience score that we use. So they're calculated, and Jay's going to talk maybe a little later about the signals that go into these things. And we've got a tool that lets you look into the signals, what's basically driving these by topic, and what are the inputs that make this stuff happen. But those are basically the numbers, and the cost obviously is a cost for automated conversation. How often I satisfy the customer and what it costs me to make that happen.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll save some of those questions to get a bit more into that. I'm sure you've got a lot of stuff to say on that as well, Jay. But maybe let's jump into the demo, shall we? Let's have a look at this thing, and maybe we can get to some of those questions during the demo, actually, if the time is right.
Yeah, and we could spend an hour in this demo. We're going to do probably a 5-minute version, so it's going to be very light.
Well, this is you folks are giving me a challenge here.
Yeah, we've got 15 minutes on the webinar. We had a little bit of an issue with the sound, so I mean, if people are game, I mean, what's happened in previous webinars is people have hung back and for the questions and stuff like that. So there's no need to rush. I think that we've still got. I think probably from those that joined, there's 95% of people that are still here, so they must be interested in what you've got to say. So don't rush to the demo. Let's just have a look. Maybe we can get to some questions as we kind of go through it.
Sounds good. Appreciate it. Otherwise, I was saying you gave me quite a challenge to squeeze it all into a few minutes.
No,
yeah, all good. Here's Operations Center. This is where it all kind of hits the road. So I'll give you a quick overview of how it works, and then we'll go through one scenario. But certainly there's a ton here. There's no way we'll justify it even on an hour-long demo even. So we start with Operations Center. All of our data is coming from your transcripts. Doesn't matter the platform. You can have 4 platforms. A couple of big cloud providers and open source. What have you. The key that powers all of this is the transcripts coming in. So this is everything between the customer and the bot, as well as the customer and the agent. All comes in. We've got models that sort through it all, identify all of the different signals, Ian's talked about so far, and calculates all of our metrics at that topic level. But when you first, jump into the tool, you're greeted by this sort of welcome, dashboard. Our key overall metrics, your bot automation, your cost per automated conversation, the second dial here, your bot customer experience, and then finally your agent score. Gives you a sense of, how am I doing today? Where's everything compared to where I need it to be, and high level metrics. If this was the end of the demo, we'd say, hey, you guys have talked about, uncovering and going in and actioning, and certainly this is the start, and it gives you how's it going, and then you go deeper and you start looking at things at the topic level. That's where we really get the ability to manage our bots a little bit better and understand how they're doing. So I'll come into this other section that we call conversation analytics. Again, all of these transcripts coming in, an independent topic model that Wysdom's put together. So it's not your bot classifier. Think of it as an audit of what's happening of your bot. We'll detect these contact reasons automatically. Like Ian said, usually around 150, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, depending on your use cases and the sophistication of your business. But these get automatically detected, and the metrics are calculated by topic. And this is where it really gets interesting. So there's a lot here. You can see how far the scroll ball goes. But the key is it helps you identify where there's things you need to address. So here's my bot automation score. Again, as a recap, this isn't containment. It's a subset of chats that didn't get to an agent. This is where we're measuring, based on signals in the transcript, whether or not the bot actually solved the customer problem. So if you're like me, you're already scanning these numbers. You're sort of looking at, hey, interesting, product information is at 24, but delayed order is 1. Essentially meaning nobody's getting solved for this particular topic, delayed order. Terrible. Our containment, I think, is a little bit higher, about 12. So if you're running this bot, you're looking at all of these and saying, 12%, maybe not so bad. I still get some ROI, but in reality, you're not. You're virtually automating none at 1%. So this is where, if you're following along, immediately you're saying, okay, I don't know what's going on here. Why is this so low? Why is my agent experience so low at 58? What's my bot experience like for that topic? 48, pretty bad. But here's another one that's even lower, at damaged orders. And you can imagine, you've ordered something from this fictional retailer, you finally get it shipped, who knows how long in COVID times, maybe months or years later by the time you order it. and it comes damaged. Again, automated, very few, and experience at 37. So let's learn more about it, right? You don't want to stop here. You want to know what's going on exactly. Why are so few people happy with this experience? And that's what I'll click in. A lot here. I'm going to jump, since we're on a whistle-stop tour of Operations Center, over to transcripts. And then I'll take a step back into the bot management world that I've been part of in the last 5 years. We'll launch a bot for our customer, and it's working okay. We've got some metrics coming in, and we've got an automation score, we've got a feedback score back before we had the depths or the detail we get from Operations Center. And what you get is this summary metric of how well your bot's doing. And I've always said to my team, you've got to dedicate part of your time to reading these interactions. You have to know word for word what the user's saying, what your bot responds with, and back and forth. And that's the only way you'll know whether or not your bot response was actually specific to the question. The intent might be, or the topic might be, by phone. But within that, the user might have said something specific like, my phone broke, I need to find a new one. And wait, do you want to address a damage or a warranty claim, or do you want to address the by phone? And so until you look at some of these transcripts, it's unclear usually, what exactly is happening. So that's why we've built this thing around the ability for you to start at the top, see where there's differences in topics, and then the ability to come right down into the weeds and say, okay, what's happening with my bot and my customer? So I'll pick one here to show you, at random, but it's a demo, so everyone knows it may not be exactly at random. But here's the transcript I picked out. The user said, I got a damage order, here's my order number, my phone number. The bot attempts to support, and the agent eventually picks up. But even though I've got the transcript, it's still sort of cumbersome to read them all. You can read a few and you get a gist of what's happening. You probably want to accelerate that as well. And that's where we use large language models to help us and some of the generative AI capabilities. So we've added this summary feature in. Oh, I got to scroll up a bit to see it. And this is where very quickly you start seeing, okay, what happened in the conversation? So the customer received a damage order, wanted to know what to do. The bot gave them information on how to return it. But the customer said, you know what, I want to speak to an agent anyway. And you sort of read it, and the agent offered similar options, except they've got the compensation. And so what I've learned from this now is the agent said virtually the same things. You can go and return it, and I'll offer you a credit. But now you make the decision as a bot manager, should we have saved that $10? Should we have offered something in my bot conversation that allows the user to get to a compensation? Probably not so easily, right? Because everyone will take advantage of it. But here's an opportunity now to say, I can probably automate this, solve them, not cost at $10, because ultimately we probably would have given them that anyway. But maybe add that into the bot use case. So you can see how we started with overall bot performance down into the topic to say, here's a problem area. To somewhere I can now go and say, here's an idea. Let's do some case analysis around it. Let's do some, cost benefit. Do we want to add this particular sort of handling into the bot itself? And now to use sort of a business buzzword, but you've had data-driven decision making. You've got numbers, you've got transcripts, you've got topics, and you can make a far more informed decision. You're not wasting sprint cycles. You're not ripping out your platform. You're not, doing all this other stuff that it frankly is a waste of money when you could have addressed it in your bot.
Lovely.
Yeah, so that's whistle stop tour. I want to add one more thing, and then maybe we can get to some of the questions, Kane. But as generative AI comes on, because you're probably wondering, hey, intents and all of that may not apply in the generative AI world. And we've got a little while before they're enterprise grade, but there's still this in-between period. We've got our traditional intent-based bots. We might layer on generative AI for certain use cases, but this very much still applies. So we'll start seeing, this is a traditional bot, but as if this was a general generative AI bot, we'd see some metrics around hallucination or responsibility score or sort of an ethical, because we've seen stories around the biases that some of these bots have based on the training data. You might have a brand deviation score, but some of these other ones that specifically related to generative AI bots start populating here. And now you've got the ability to say, how does my bot do when it's generating a response for a particular topic? And you design, do I need to adjust my prompting or training for that particular topic? Or am I safe to continue to roll out some of these use cases with generative AI? So that's all coming, but what you've seen today is sort of the older current world of classifier-based chatbots.
it's crazy how something that is like, you know, a technology that's only really been at kind of like production grade ready, really at scale for the last like 5 years, is now being spoken about as old. um, I actually think that for as much excitement as there is around large language models, there's a lot of organizations that have invested a lot in intent-based NLU systems, and they're not working that badly. So I actually think that it's going to take a bit longer for the incumbents that have been doing this for a few years to switch out to LLMs, because as you said, LLMs have got a long way to go as far as accuracy and the tools around it that you need to manage them properly and stuff like that. But it's good. That was one of the questions actually that someone had, was what about LLMs? So you've already answered one of the questions, which is good.
And I think, sorry, Kate, I was going to say on the LLMs, it's a great point. You know, that you can really go two paths, I think, with them. You can enhance your current bot with large language models, or you can replace it. Like say, I think the replacement is a little down the road, but there are a ton of enhancements, you know, we're seeing already. You know, they're good at, you know, the long queries, where some of the classifier bots struggle with long queries. LLMs are doing a good job. Response generation, where your content, you know, might not have been clear or something, some of the response generation is good. So I think the enhancement over the next year, 18 months is probably going to be the primary use case of LLMs. And we'll see the full scale replacement of, you know, of the first gen bots, maybe starting in 18 months. But that's our thought of what we're helping our clients through.
Definitely. That's wicked. So we do have some questions. So the first question is, how do you define the automation score? So there's a number. How do you specifically do that? Is that manually tagged? So you go to every intent or every conversation and you say, if the customer reaches this point, then that means it's success. Like, how do you do that?
It's a great question. So, you know, we've been doing this for many years, and, you know, years ago we had the same problem. We had, you know, all of our clients across all different industries, everybody's measuring something different, and we could, you know, difficult to make sense out of it. So we said, we need a standard. And we started developing standards many years ago into these BAS and BAS, you know, kind of the two big ones. And the automation score today, after some refinement, has just 6 signals. So there's 6 signals in the bot automation score. And I can't remember them all right now, but it's, you know, bot repetition, you know, sort of did the customer reach an endpoint rate? Yeah, false positive rate is in there. So number of signals, and it all comes from the, you know, from the conversation data itself. So we've got an AI model that determines, you know, that sort of monitors the conversation data, 100% of them, and determines these 6 signals from every conversation. Some, of course, you can't get it. We sort of, you know, 80-90% of conversations will have enough signal, you know, in the noise. And you'll produce this rate based on these 6 events that the AI determined was in that conversation data. And the bot experience score is the same thing. There's 7 signals in the bot experience score. And the same thing, it comes from the conversation transcripts themselves. Every single conversation is rated, looking for these 7 signals. And then there's a set of math, kind of like NPS, but, you know, our particular math that produces this score. And they're not perfect. They give you very, you know, they're quite accurate. You'll always find one that say, oh, we thought we automated this customers and we didn't, but we're talking about 1 million conversations. But generally, overall, they're very, you know, on target. These things will give you a very good indication of your topic and how often you solved customer problems in that topic and what kind of customer experience you delivered in that topic. So signal-based, you know, signal-based AI generates the signals, just uses the conversation stream, is really the way that we produce these things.
Interesting. So how does that work with an assistant that has got like different types of use cases? So for example, hold on, I'm on the phone, Artie. He's my son, is he? Sorry. he hasn't seen me all day. I've been away last night. Bit BBC-esque, that one. So some bots have got different things that they do, right? So you've got some that answer questions, you've got some that facilitate transactions, like you've got lots of different sort of types of use cases. How do you kind of sort
it's a great point. Yeah, it's a great point too. We struggled with this exact same thing many years ago. We said, how do we measure everybody? You know, how is one client doing versus everybody else? And we helped clients with many different bots, a lot of different use cases. Primarily, you know, we see a lot of customer service bots. It's kind of the number one thing I think where these things are getting deployed still. But we still see a lot of internal employee services bots, HR, you know, type bots and tech support bots internally. And we've got foreign exchange trading bots. We've got bots for, retailers, people on the floor, and looking for help, for themselves, sort of agent assist bots. So we saw a lot of different use cases across this bot world, and we wanted a standard that worked across them all. It was really the critical thing, right? I can't have one standard here and it's not a standard that way, and I really can't measure everybody. So we tried to boil it down to the lowest common denominator. And again, did I solve the customer's problem? Customer may be, hey, I want to return, a dishwasher that, is faulty, whatever, because it was broken. Or the customer's need might be, hey, how many vacation days do I have left? Or, can I, spend $5,000 on my kid's braces? Whatever the customer's need was, did I solve it? So that was the number one across all the use cases. And we built this set of signals that was very effective across all those. And the number two, again, regardless of my use case, how did the customer feel? Whether the customer was an employee, whether it was a partner, whether it was, sort of an end customer of a big bank or telco, same thing, how did the customer feel? So we tried to build them, with that in mind, that they would work across all kinds of use cases. And we've found it's been super effective, and it's really worked well. And we've barely tweaked them, over the last couple of years. And we just keep sort of deploying them, and it gives us that guidance we need. Not to say there aren't 100 metrics. Like say, if we had more time, you can see the tabs down the left. There's a lot more sections. We get you into all the metrics. They're all there. There's all kinds of things you want to see, like Jay said, false positive rates and intent recommendations, and sort of escalation, things in queue management, and all that stuff. Super important. But at the top, we found these have been super effective.
Nice. Cool. We've got a few more questions. If you don't mind stopping sharing your screen just a minute, Jay, just so we can get back to the other view. We can always pull it back up again if we have a question where we feel like we want to dig into there. I'm going to invite some people up because some people have raised their hands, so it looks as though people might be open to having a bit of a chat with us. So I'm going to invite Margot to ask Margot. You can ask your question. You can unmute yourself if you like, if you've got a question for Ian and Jay. Are you there, Margot? Doesn't look like we can hear you. Can you hear us? No. Let's try Michael. So we've got Michael. Hello, Michael. Can you hear us? Have you got a question for Ian and Jay?
Feels like a radio talk show.
It does, doesn't it? Michael, can you hear us? You're on mute.
I can hear you. I did not have a question, but I really appreciate the information. It's very helpful.
No, maybe we can't hear you there. Maybe we can ask in the chat there. I thought we'd try a little bit of impulsive sort of like radio show Q&A, but unfortunately,
put us on the spot. What the hell?
Yeah, it seems like there's a bit of an issue. Never mind. Okay, we do have some other questions. So, is it possible to define a task completion metric by topics, themes, or different user needs? So can you have a different type of completion metric dependent on the use case? It's kind of similar to what I asked a little bit earlier, but is there, I know you've got a way of measuring that, but is there a way of being more specific? Like you want to know X thing about this type of use case?
Yeah, I think as Jay showed, what we call topics is very much, similar to task completion rate. And we've seen some of our clients use, metrics like that and all kinds of other ones. So if you look at a particular topic in that topic list Jay showed, again, AI generated 100 to 150 usually, and it really gets down to that task level. We call them topics, but tasks is probably similar. And you get something like, return appliance in the example we were talking about retail. And, the task was customer wanted to return, or a lot of times we get, in the telco world, we see a lot of, dispatch, I want a truck roll, I want to send somebody out. And the task might have been, something along those lines. And we'll give an automation score for that particular topic or task, which is very much indicative, like say, the task completion rate. So we found, again, it's led us to understand in those particular topics how often we've been effective in the bot of solving the customer's problem, or basically sort of knocking off that task. So I think it's very close. It might be slightly different, but we found, Jay, it's, like I said, we've been working with a lot of clients using these, and we found it's effective too.
Yeah,
and improve on those.
When we talked a little bit about containment, I know we brushed it off as not being the end all and be all, but there still is a role to play. And the way the sort of number one secret I've been sharing around Operations Center is the best way to find whether or not the task was completed or an answer was received was compare the automation score to the containment score. Because if you think about it, containment is that measure of user getting to an agent. And if everything was perfect, a contained chat was also a resolved chat. But we know that's not true. So when we start looking at the deltas between the automation score and and maybe I'll pull it up. I've got it here loaded. When you start seeing the deltas, it signals to you that that wasn't completed or that wasn't solved. And that gap between them gives you a sense of how bad it is. So cancel order, here's where my mouse, 25, a quarter of the time we've contained it, but only 10% we think we've resolved or automated. And then so there's something happening here where the user didn't, actually be able to cancel through the tool that the bots provided, or they got into a loop and they never were able to finish, or what they were asking wasn't properly responded to by the bot, or what of the other 6 signals. And this is how I've been trying to get the most summary. But this is where I've been sharing with my customers to say, look at this, and this delta is your signal of where there was a problem, where the task wasn't completed, whether that was where the chat wasn't automated. And we talked a little bit about user groups. This demo doesn't have it, but we'll filter here. I didn't show it, but by channel, you might have, employee user group or department if it's an employee internal bot. You might have customer segment coming through here. There's a lot more we can start filtering by to say, okay, for this type of user, what's happening? And then, like I said, compared to that containment and automation gets you a good idea of whether or not that particular user was able to solve the problem.
Nice. And so in order to get to what you've just showed there, in order to have my data from my bot in here, you mentioned that all you need is transcripts. How do you actually do it? How would an enterprise or a company implement this? Do they send you their chat transcripts somehow? Is it an SDK you put in the bot? Like, how is it actually implemented?
We've got a few different, we're pretty flexible. We've got some that'll send us data, every night, a flat file that comes over through some file transfer service. It's probably the simplest for some, but we find the most powerful is, we'll call an API. So we'll, out of your contact center platform usually has an API exposed. We get what we need from there. And others will have, a data store or a data lake that will go in, and we've got adapters ready. So they'll go into something like Snowflake, query what they need to query, given the table structure that we expect from the bot platform, like a dialog flow, and we'll suck that all in. This can sit in your environment as a private cloud, and can be sort of a shared, but we remain flexible. We need those transcripts. So that's what we need. And whatever we can, everything that we can generate comes from that conversation data. But we are flexible in the mechanism to pull that in.
Nice. The question from Margot is, I think we might have actually covered this a little bit earlier on, is the accuracy an important KPI to measure the accuracy of your NLU? I think we did cover that earlier on when we were talking about myths and stuff like that. Yes, it's important because you don't want to not classify what people are saying, but in the broader context of helping people resolve their issues, it's not quite as important as what we've been discussing here: bot automation score, customer experience score, and all that kind of stuff. So yes, but probably one of the not one of the primary KPIs as far as we're learning here. Okay, so the final question I had is around kind of, lots of people measure lots of different things. NLU confidence is a prime example of one. Like, some companies will say that's our North Star. We want to make sure that all of our intents are all accurate with 80%, 90%, confidence score, stuff like that. Some measure containment. I know a lot of big enterprises that measure containment, which is like, did it stop someone from calling in this conversation, yes or no? And so lots of people measure lots of different things. And I know that you're keen on exploring and kind of proposing that we should have more of a standardized approach to the way we measure things. And so are we getting to the point where we can discuss standards? Are we still a bit kind of Wild West with the emergence of LLMs and stuff like that? Give us your perspectives on how we might arrive at some kind of standardization across all conversational AI assistants.
Yeah. I think it's a great question. We think about it all the time, and our thesis is all industries, sort of new technology emerges, and it's kind of the Wild West, as you said. Everybody's doing something different. It really holds back the adoption, holds back the maturity and the effectiveness of any new technology. And, you see something like NPS come along. NPS, I don't know how old it is, 20, 25 years. And everybody in the world, can use NPS and compare to everybody else. We all know Apple's got the best NPS in the world at 75 or whatever. And a bunch of companies have, negative 50 and the NPS. But you can go calculate yours all day long, same question, same math. I get a number. And there's some, magic value in that. I just know where I stand, compared to everybody else. And again, it drives forward all kinds of marketing programs and all kinds of businesses, put their bonuses on it. So it's super effective at making us all more efficient. And in this, new technology of this bot space, we're all measuring something different. It's all over the place, and nobody can really tell maybe if they're doing well or doing badly. And I think we are going to get to that point. Is it today? I hope so. The sooner the better. We have some kind of a standard like an NPS. We can all measure and say, okay, where do I rank? What should I focus on? We teach people, getting into the industry. Here's what you should work on. Here's the metrics we're going to use. If I change jobs, I'm going to take my same metrics and not have to, relearn something every time I go to a new organization. Assuming there are going to be a lot of bot managers in this world, hundreds of thousands or millions one day. We all need to be working kind of to the same goals. And we've built our own, and we found they're very effective, whether these are them or they're something else. It's about time. Like I said, the LLM thing is definitely throwing a wrench in the gears a little, because everybody's starting to question, am I going to get rid of my classifier and replace it with a large language model? And it probably is going to happen, but it's a few years away. But at the end of the day, we think, the key metrics are still the same. How often do I solve the customer's problem? That is the core purpose of a bot. How did the customer feel? Super important. All mature organizations go to customer sat right away. They want loyalty and customers to be happy. And then my cost for running businesses. I need to know my cost per automated conversation. Those are the big three. So whether those are the standard, and how, whether, whatever signals you use, we think those should be the, kind of the North Star of every bot team. And then, we all measure them hopefully the same way. And I think this whole industry would jump forward, especially as we make this migration to large language model or generative AI bots. We're going to need, something to keep it from, just sort of devolving into even a little more chaos than we've got today. So we're big believers. We think it makes sense. We've seen it across, 50 clients and how it makes life easier. Everybody knows where they stand compared to everybody else. We'd like to see it across, 5,000 or 50,000 bots.
Nice. We've got two more questions, and then we'll wrap up. I'll get to you. It says anonymous attendee, so apologies I can't give you a shout out. Ed says containment is a measure created by first gen bot vendors who couldn't measure anything else. Resolution is where it's at. Absolutely.
I like that.
I love it. Yeah.
The cost side of things, you're measuring cost per automated conversation. How are you calculating that cost? And is that a cost which is cost saved to the business based on the cost of what it would have cost to answer the call if it was a human? Is it the cost that it's taken to deliver that conversation, as in like the running of the NLU, the procurement of the various tools, software running costs, stuff like that? Like, how are you defining that cost? Maybe it's Jay, you can. I'll go on.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah. Happy to, and Ian certainly add to it. But it's not the cost saved; it's the cost of actually handling that particular chat. So it has the measures of running on your bot platform and the analytics and the team. So there's different ways, and the tool helps you configure those, so you know exactly how your bot's doing. And how it's been useful for me, and managing some of our clients' bots or working with clients is, once you know where your bot stands in terms of costs, you make better decisions on where do you invest in the bot. And this may be controversial, but the best bot manager knows when their bot can't handle it. It's going to say, you know what, this is something I'm not going to toy with. It's a customer topic that I need to get to an agent. And it might be because of experience, it might be because of the sophistication, the ability to handle, but it may simply be because the cost for an agent to do it may actually be lower. And the experience isn't as bad, let's say. And now that I have these metrics, I'll say, you know what, I'm going to make the decision for this topic to send over to the bot and have my agent handle it, because it's going to be better. So some of these, around the bot costs and the platform costs and humans that are managing your program all get put into, and then your bot automation rate, kind of the final score there.
And we should say, like I said, I can't resist this stuff, but because I've worked in contact centers in the software space for some time. If you walk down the hall, if anybody's in an office anymore, which nobody is, but if you send a Slack message to the contact center managers and say, how do you measure cost per call and cost per chat? We tried to make it as similar as possible. This is something all contact centers know and most businesses know well. and they have a certain measure. You take your overall, it's like, it's like your customer acquisition cost in SaaS or something like that. You get a pretty typical formula. You take your overall cost for your program, includes the people, the tech, everything you're spending, divided by the actual, denominator is the number of satisfied customers, your automation rate, and you get a cost per automated conversation. So it's not difficult, very similar to what people are doing in the contact center today. We've tried to stick to, a standard business metric that everybody's known for in the last 20, 30 years.
Nice. And then final question, again, this is from anonymous attendee, which says, what it should do is, how Intercom does kind of like, it just gives random names to anonymous people, like Indigo Sherbet from Scunthorpe. Should do that, but apparently it's an anonymous attendee. Maybe this is a question for you, Jay. Do you integrate with Oracle? I'm assuming that it probably means Oracle, or he or she, or probably means Oracle Digital Assistant.
Yeah, we've seen the biggest and the smallest bot platforms come in. It's the transcript that's the key, right? And that transcript gets logged and we'll get the transcript. So it can be one or multiple platforms. That the key is getting that conversation history into Operations Center here.
Nice.
Yeah, and we've got a library of
And we've done-
connectors, right?
yeah, exactly.
We've done with most of the big guys. I don't know if Oracle's in the library, but we'd have to have a look.
Nice one. Cool. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. I think what we've learned is that there's definitely some assumptions that people have, which I think are wrong assumptions. And there's a lot of things that you, for example, you don't need to move your bot platform just because your bot's not performing very well. You don't need to have your bot be a negative experience because you're trying to save costs. You don't need data scientists to analyze all of your conversations. You can do that a lot simpler if you use a tool like Wysdom AI. You can join or you can find out more at Wysdom.ai, and essentially what we'll do after this, we'll send you the recording if you want to watch it back later on. If you want to send it to your colleagues, please do if you think they'll find it interesting. I found it incredibly interesting because, as you've said, Ian, there's no standards in this space at the moment, and so anything that we can do to try and harmonise and come together on some metrics that everyone can speak to and we all understand, we're all measuring the same thing, the better it'll be for us all. So thank you both for joining me, Ian and Jay. It's been fantastic, as I knew it would be. Thank you all for tuning in. Apologies for the little audio issues we had at the beginning there, but I think we got through it and we got over it, and it was absolutely amazing session. So Wysdom.ai if you want to learn more, and we'll see you on the next webinar. If you haven't bought your tickets for Unparsed, I'll do a sneaky plug at the end there. Unparsed is the world's first conversation design conference in person in London on the 24th and 25th of July. It's going to be all about conversation design, how to craft compelling conversation experiences. You can get your tickets at unparsedconf.com. And without further ado, that's a wrap. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Jay. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Been great.
Great being here. Bye, everyone.
Bye now.
Thanks,
Bye
bye.
now.